What if the melody that once brought two souls together came back to life 13 years later? What if a single note played by the hands of a stranger could unravel everything a powerful man thought he knew about his past? Lucas Hart, a tech mogul revered for his sharp mind and colder heart, walks into a quiet restaurant and freezes because the woman at the piano isn't just a server. She's the girl he once loved, the one who vanished without a word. But what if she didn't vanish? What if someone made sure they'd never find each other again? And what if they weren't the only two caught in the silence? Behind the music lies a hidden truth, a child, a betrayal, a second chance that might come too late or just in time. This is a story about the love that refused to fade, the music that refused to be silenced, and the family that had to be rebuilt, one note at a time. If you believe in love that endures, in healing after heartbreak, and in stories that echo long after the music ends, like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories, because this journey, it begins now. That night, the restaurant known as Auburn and Ash shimmered like a quiet dream. Gentle amber light spilled across glassware, catching the edges of wine and water like whispered memories. There was no loudness here, only elegance wrapped in stillness, where every sound felt deliberate, every silence meaningful. People spoke in soft tones. Laughter came like a breeze occasional, restrained. It was a place where power moved quietly, where fortunes were reshaped not with noise, but with glances over dessert and delicate wine. At a table in the farthest corner, a man sat alone, Lucas Hart. His presence didn't demand attention, it commanded it. His dark olive suit fit him like armor, sharp and measured. He was 36, already one of the most whispered names in global tech. From a near-bankrupt family firm, he had built Heartwave Systems, a digital empire that stretched across continents. Tonight should have marked a triumph. The long-awaited deal with Belford Communications had finally closed after almost a year of silent battles and sleepless nights. But Lucas felt none of it. As he flicked through contracts on his sleek tablet, a hollow silence echoed inside him, louder than the clinking of cutlery around. His eyes lifted to the restaurant's tall window, where his reflection stared back at him, jaw clenched, eyes a cold silver, distant, hair perfectly arranged, untouched by time. He looked like a man who had everything and somehow nothing at all. Then it came, the first few notes, soft, tentative, almost like a whisper returning after years of silence. Lucas froze. The melody was unmistakable. He turned, slowly. In the quiet corner where a polished piano stood, a woman was seated, her posture upright, dignified. Her fingers, though marked by years of labor, moved with practiced grace. Her dark hair fell in soft waves, brushing the edge of her shoulder as she played. She wore a server's uniform, but it couldn't disguise the elegance in her hands, the certainty in her touch. And then he knew. It wasn't just any melody. It was his. The piece he had written 2 decades ago, during a summer that smelled of wildflowers and late-night laughter. For her, the girl with warm eyes and a voice that believed in dreams. The woman turned slightly, catching the light. He saw her profile, the soft curve of her cheek, the scar above her brow, faint but unforgettable, and those eyes still carrying the same quiet fire that once set his world alight. Isla Carter, his hand, still holding the wine glass, trembled almost imperceptibly. 20 years vanished in a single heartbeat. She was here, the girl who once held his heart and disappeared without a trace. She was the only person who had ever truly known him before the accolades, before the numbers on magazine covers defined his worth. And now, here she was, playing the song that once belonged only to them. Lucas sat still, breath barely steady, as the final chords lingered in the air like a secret refusing to fade. Then she opened her eyes, slowly. Her gaze drifted across the restaurant until it found his. For one breathless moment, time forgot to move. Recognition bloomed first, then shock, and beneath it, something else that twisted in his gut. Fear. "You look like you've seen a ghost," came a voice beside him, slicing through the silence. Graham Ellis, his chief of staff and oldest friend, placed 2 glasses of whiskey on the table and followed Lucas's fixed stare toward the stage now empty. The woman was gone, the staff door still swaying behind her like the last note of a forgotten melody. "I think I might have," Lucas murmured, his voice rough with something unspoken. Graham studied him, that face pale, shaken. He had only seen it once before, nearly 15 years ago, when Lucas came back from his semester abroad and learned that Isla Carter had disappeared without a trace. "Wait." Graham leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Was that her? The girl from St. Clara?" Lucas gave the smallest nod, his eyes refusing to move from the vacant piano bench. "She played our song," he said quietly, "the one I composed for her." Graham gave a low whistle, astonishment flickering in his expression. "That's not coincidence. She saw me." Lucas's voice tightened, and she looked afraid. Graham had stood beside Lucas for more than a decade. He'd seen him rise, brilliant, relentless, from a hopeful grad student to the tech titan known for dismantling corporations and rebuilding them stronger. People called him the strategist. But now Graham saw someone else entirely. The young man who once filled notebooks with lyrics, the boy who stayed up nights rearranging chords, believing music could change the world before he traded emotion for efficiency. "You should speak to her," Graham said gently, but firmly. Lucas scoffed, half a laugh, half a defense. "And say what that I vanished from her life. She's the one who left." "Is she?" Graham arched a brow. "You said you wrote her letters. Did you ever know if she got them?" Lucas didn't answer, because the truth was, he hadn't. When he came back from Europe that December, ready to see her, she was gone. No job, no forwarding address, no word. The calls never connected. The letters came back unopened, eventually. His mother had said what he didn't want to hear. It was just the summer. It wasn't meant to last. "You've regretted losing her for nearly 15 years, Graham continued, voice lower now. "She's right there. Lucas, 20 steps away. Don't make it 15 more. Lucas instinctively glanced at his wristwatch. It was the kind of motion that had become second nature schedule before sentiment. Graham sighed. "The company won't fall apart if you take one night off." He stood, pushing in his chair. "I'll handle the Baxter briefing in the morning. Call it a gift for 10 years of loyalty and tolerating your terrible work-life balance." Lucas tried to object, but Graham was already walking away. "You've got no excuse now," he said over his shoulder. "Find out the truth, because it's clear whatever happened. It wasn't what you thought." And then he was gone. Lucas stayed seated, motionless, the ice in his drink melting untouched, as questions long buried began to stir. His thoughts spiraled, retracing the final weeks before he left for university abroad. Those golden days with Isla, filled with wild hopes and whispered promises. The plans they had drawn, the future they believed in. What had gone wrong, and why? After nearly 2 decades, was she playing their song tonight of all nights? The door behind the piano swung open quietly. Lucas looked up. She had changed out of her uniform now and worn jeans and a soft sky-blue sweater. Something about the simplicity of it felt more true than any designer label around them. She spoke briefly to the maitre d', then turned toward the exit, slipping on her coat. Lucas stood. He didn't remember deciding to move. His body had simply responded to something his heart hadn't dared to feel in years. He followed. The woman who had once seen him before the world turned him into a title, before ambition hardened his edges, before he buried everything tender beneath numbers and strategy. He paused just at the threshold of the restaurant. Outside, Isla pulled her coat tighter against the cool night breeze. Lucas's heart thudded in his chest, a wild, unfamiliar rhythm. What if she doesn't want to see me? She wasn't the soft-spoken student he once knew. There was strength now in her posture, a quiet resilience shaped not by books or melodies, but by life. What if she's married? His eyes dropped to her left hand. No ring. But that meant little. What if she hates me? That thought struck deepest. Then, like a whisper from the past, the song returned to him. the one he had written with her in mind during those sun-drenched afternoons at his mother's countryside estate. He could still feel the summer breeze drifting through the open windows, carrying the scent of wild gardenias. Isla had sat beside him at the grand piano, her fingers mimicking his movements. "Play it again," she had whispered, eyes wide with wonder. "Show me that middle part." Her shoulder had pressed gently against his. He remembered the furrow of her brow as she concentrated, the soft laugh when she missed a note. "You're a natural," he'd told her. She had smiled and answered, "I'm just a waitress who shelves books in the evenings." "But someday," she added, voice low but fierce with hope, "someday." They had sketched a life between piano keys and shared glances. She would study music, he would study business, and when he returned, they would build something real together. But now, all those dreams felt like sketches left out in the rain. He heard her voice in memory again. "At the airport, I'll wait for you. Just don't forget me when you meet all those brilliant London girls." He had laughed, kissed her for the last time, and boarded his flight believing without question that she'd be there when he returned. But when he came back 3 months later, she was gone. No note, no reason. Just an absence that echoed through every room he expected to find her in. He never did find answers. Over the years, he told himself it didn't matter. That time would smooth over the hurt. But that was a lie. And now, with just a song, she had cracked open the part of him that never truly healed. Outside, a taxi slowed beside Isla. She lifted her hand to flag it. This is it, Lucas realized. If she gets in that car, I may never see her again. He inhaled sharply, his chest tightened. Then finally he stepped forward. He stepped into the night air, its chill sharp against his breath, and called her name for the first time in nearly 15 years. Isla. She turned. Her expression shifted from startled surprise to something far more layered recognition mixed with something deeper, unease, maybe even fear. For a brief, aching moment, he thought she would ignore him, that she'd step into the waiting taxi and vanish once more. But instead, she raised her hand. The driver nodded and pulled away. Isla turned to face him fully. "Hello, Lucas." Her voice was calm, but the way her fingers clenched the strap of her purse betrayed the tremor beneath it. "I wondered if you'd remember me. You were playing our song," he said softly. "I'd know it even in another lifetime." A flicker of emotion passed through her eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here. Neither did I." He took a step forward, cautious, as if afraid she might vanish again. "It's been a long time." She didn't smile, didn't soften. 14 years. And almost 2 months, she said. The exactness in her tone cut through him more sharply than anger might have. "And now, you're someone important." There was no praise in her voice, no resentment either, just fact. But somehow, it hollowed something inside him. "Isla." He started, but the question tangled on his tongue. "What happened? Why did you?" She lifted her hand gently, stopping him. "Not here. Not now." Lucas tried to gather himself. "Your shift's over." She glanced at her watch and nodded. "Just finished. I only play Thursdays. After closing." "Only Thursdays," he echoed, more question in the tone than in the words. She didn't look at him. "That was the day you first taught me to play." That detail, so small and specific, hit harder than he expected. She hadn't just remembered the music. She remembered when it began. The years between them suddenly felt both impossibly wide and heartbreakingly close. "Could we talk?" he asked. "Just a few minutes." Isla hesitated. Her eyes scanned the quiet street, like she was trying to calculate the cost of staying. "I need to get home. I can drive you." The offer escaped before he could second-guess it. Her eyes narrowed slightly. He backtracked quickly. Or not. Of course. Coffee. Maybe he'd tried again. "There's a place just around the corner. It's quiet, still open." She looked torn. For the first time, her composure cracked just a hair. 5 minutes, she said at last. That's all. They walked in silence. Not touching, not close. Lucas noticed how her arms stayed folded across her chest, a distance she seemed intent on keeping. The small cafe was nearly empty. A few candles flickered in the corners, and soft jazz hummed through hidden speakers. She chose the farthest table from the windows. He brought over 2 coffees. "You're doing well," she said without preamble. "I've seen your name. Lucas Hart, Heartwave Systems." He nodded. "The company's grown a lot these past 10 years. Congratulations." The word landed flat, as though it didn't quite fit in her mouth. "What about you?" he asked gently. Besides the piano at Auburn and Ash, something shifted in her, then a flicker of pride, but also defiance. "I work 3 jobs," she said evenly. "The restaurant covers most things. I teach piano on weekends. And I'm finally finishing my music degree." "That's incredible," Lucas said, and meant it. "It's necessary," she replied, her voice firmer now. He sensed it, the edge, the weight, the pieces of her story he hadn't yet heard. But one question refused to wait. "Why did you leave?" Without a word, it came out more raw than he'd intended. The wound still there beneath the polished surface. Isla's hand froze mid-reach for her cup. She looked at him, truly looked, and in her eyes he saw a storm that had been quiet for far too long. Disbelief tightened across her features, followed closely by something rawer pain, long buried but never quite gone. "That's what you think happened?" Isla asked, her voice low. "What else could it have been?" Lucas replied, frustration threading through his tone. "I came back from London for winter break, and you were just gone. No note, no trace." His voice faltered. "I wrote you, Isla, every week, for months, and every letter came back, unopened. Letters." Her brow furrowed, truly confused now. "Lucas, I never got a single one. I called. You never picked up. I sent them to your apartment. Over and over." Her expression shifted, confusion giving way to realization, then, slowly, to something darker. "What did your mother tell you?" The question caught him off guard. "She said you'd moved on, that you told the library you were leaving the state. Something about personal reasons." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. There was no humor in it, only disbelief. "So that's the story Evelyn gave you," she said quietly, using his mother's name with a chill that cut through the warmth of the cafe. Lucas blinked. "Wait. What are you saying?" Isla leaned in. Her voice dropped to a whisper, heavy with memory. "She came to see me, right after you left." Lucas stared at her, stunned. "She said we had no future." Isla continued, her gaze unwavering. "She told me that you'd agreed it was just a summer thing, that you didn't want to be tied down. Not with someone like me." Lucas's world tilted, like the ground beneath him had shifted. "I never said that. I didn't believe her. Not at first," Isla admitted. But then, weeks passed, no calls, no letters, and eventually, she looked away, her voice quiet but firm. "I had to start believing maybe she was right." Lucas leaned forward, shaking his head. "She lied to you. I called so many times. When I came back, your landlord said you'd left with no notice, no forwarding address. It made no sense." Isla's face softened, just a little. She was thorough, she said. The weight of that simple truth settled heavily between them. Lucas raked a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of what he now knew. His mother, who had raised him alone after his father's passing, who always spoke of protecting the family name, had sabotaged the one thing in his life that wasn't about power or legacy. Why, he asked, though some part of him already knew. "You were a heart," Isla said gently, "and I was. A scholarship girl shelving books and counting tips." To Lucas, it had never mattered. But to Evelyn Hart, he knew it had meant everything. "I'm sorry," he said, though the words felt too small for all that had been lost. Isla gave a slight nod. Acceptance, perhaps, but not forgiveness. Not yet. "It wasn't just about me," she added quietly. Lucas stilled. Her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, eyes downcast. Then she spoke the words that shattered the air between them. I was pregnant. 2 syllables. Enough to change everything. He stared at her, breath caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. You were a son, Lucas repeated, his voice barely more than breath. The word tasted unfamiliar, almost too big to form. Isla nodded slowly, watching him with guarded eyes. His name is Elliot. He's 12. The math was effortless and devastating. I have a son, Lucas whispered. Yes, she replied quietly, and your mother knew. She was the first person I told. Lucas felt his chest tighten. I was 19, Isla continued, her voice steadier now. I was alone, scared, no family to turn to. I thought she hesitated. For the first time, I thought she'd help me find you. Lucas didn't need to hear the rest. The ache in his stomach told him. Instead, she offered you money. Isla looked at him, and there was fire in her eyes. She wanted it gone, wanted me gone. He swallowed, barely able to speak. Did you take it? Her answer came without hesitation. No. I told her I didn't need her help, that I would raise our baby on my own. And I did. Lucas leaned back, stunned. His voice dropped, nearly to a whisper. All these years, I never knew. I believe you, Isla said, surprising him. I can see it on your face. You didn't know. I would have come back for you. For him, Lucas said fiercely. You have to believe that. Her gaze didn't waver. Maybe I do, but it doesn't change what's already past. You built a world. I just survived in mine. There was no bitterness in her tone, only truth. I worked 3 jobs, she continued, her voice quiet, almost detached. Music lessons on weekends, night shifts to pay for school supplies, rent, meals. Lucas nodded, the weight of it pressing deeper with every word. And now he asked gently. She glanced at her watch. Now. I need to go home, to our son. Those 3 words struck him harder than anything else had. I want to meet him, he said immediately. Please. Isla stood, gathering her things. He doesn't know about you, she said carefully. Not really. I never lied to him. But I never told him the full truth either. Lucas's voice dropped. Why? Because how do you explain to a child that his father never knew he existed 3 days later? Lucas sat on a wooden bench in the park, the early autumn sun warm on his face. He checked his watch again, for the 5th time in as many minutes. His hands steady in business meetings, composed in crisis, were shaking. Couch. Isla had agreed to let them meet. With rules, it would be in public. She would be there the entire time, and Lucas would be introduced as just an old friend. Any truth about who he really was would wait until it felt right. He saw them before they saw him. Isla, walking beside a tall, slim boy with a guitar slung over his shoulder. Even from across the path, Lucas could see it. Elliot moved like him, same long stride, same intensity in his posture, but the eyes those were Isla's, deep, thoughtful, and full of unspoken questions. Lucas stood, wiping his palms on his coat. Hi, he said, voice uneven. Isla offered a gentle nod. Elliot, this is Lucas, she said, the friend I mentioned. The boy extended a hand, polite and composed beyond his years. Nice to meet you, sir. Lucas hesitated, then smiled. Just Lucas is fine. As their hands met, something shifted in him. The contact was brief, but it felt like the beginning of something neither of them had words for. My mom says you know music, Elliot said, curious. I used to play, Lucas replied. She was my best student. Elliot turned to Isla in surprise. You never told me you had a teacher. There's a lot about my wild youth you don't know, she said with a small smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. But Lucas saw the way she looked at their son, and he knew this wasn't just about music. This was about trust and time and a bond that had been waiting quietly to begin. Would you mind playing something? Lucas asked, nodding gently toward the guitar case slung across Elliot's shoulder. The boy hesitated, eyes flicking to his mother. Isla gave him a quiet, encouraging nod. "I'm practicing for my school's talent show," Elliot explained as he knelt to unzip the case. The guitar that emerged had clearly been well loved. The finish was scratched, the neck slightly worn, the body marked by years of use and humble repairs. It wasn't polished, but it had stories in every dent. As Elliot began to play, Lucas felt the air shift. The notes weren't perfect. Some hovered, uncertain, but the feeling behind them was undeniable. Rhythm and melody flowed from the boy's fingers with an ease that couldn't be taught. It was raw talent, honest and unfiltered. Lucas sat still. Breath caught somewhere between admiration and sorrow. It was like watching a reflection from long ago, a part of himself he had sealed away beneath contracts and quarterly goals. "That's one of his own," Isla murmured, watching her son with quiet pride. "He writes his own music." Lucas's chest swelled with something new and overwhelming pride. Yes, but also a deep ache for the years lost. When Elliot finished, Lucas was speechless for a beat too long. That was remarkable. He finally managed, truly. Elliot looked down, bashful. "It still needs work." Lucas smiled. "All the best pieces do. The trick is knowing which parts to polish and which to leave untouched." Elliot glanced back at Isla, then turned again to Lucas. "Could you maybe help me with the bridge part? It's not flowing the way I want it to." Lucas hesitated only a second. "I'd be honored." They sat on the park bench for the next hour, the guitar passing back and forth between them like a conversation. Lucas showed him how to shape transitions, how to smooth awkward measures. Elliot listened closely, absorbing every note. And when he laughed deep and unguarded at one of Lucas's musical jokes, Isla looked up. She stood a short distance away, arms folded not in resistance, but in quiet observation. Her expression softened as she watched her son light up. And when her gaze met Lucas's across the space between them, something subtle passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. That night, Lucas drove to the place he hadn't visited in over a year, his mother's estate. The house was just as he remembered, vast, cold, and surgically perfect. He rang the bell. The housekeeper answered, visibly surprised. "Mr. Hart, we weren't expecting you. Is my mother home? Mrs. Alden in the sunroom, sir." Lucas walked through the marble corridor, past rooms that looked like galleries more than living spaces. Every step echoed with purpose. The polished tiles announced his arrival before he reached the glass-walled garden room. There, seated beneath perfectly trimmed orchids, was Evelyn Hart. Silver hair perfectly arranged, face untouched by time, thanks to science and money. She looked up slowly, setting down her tablet. "Lucas." His name wasn't a greeting. It was a judgment. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" he replied, remaining on his feet, ignoring her motion to sit. Something in his tone made her lean back slightly, lips pressed into a line. "Has something happened at the company?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He stood, motionless, staring at the woman who had shaped so much of who he had become, both the brilliance and the brokenness. Then, quietly but firmly, he said, "I saw Isla," and the walls between them began to crack. "Has something happened with the company?" Evelyn asked, voice clipped, controlled. Lucas didn't answer that. He took a breath. "I saw Isla Carter 3 days ago." The name landed between them like a dropped stone in still water. And in that ripple, he saw it not surprise, but calculation. "The girl from your university years," Evelyn replied, folding her hands neatly. "How sentimental." "I have a son," Lucas said. No flourish, just the truth. For the first time, her composure slipped. Only a second, but enough. "No. Mother, I don't think you understand," he continued, voice dangerously soft. "I have a 12-year-old son I never knew existed, because you made sure I didn't." "Lucas, did you block her calls?" he pressed. "Did you read my letters and toss hers away? Did you lie to me when you said she moved without a word? Evelyn rose, smoothing her tailored trousers, brushing non-existent dust from her sleeve. I did what any mother would do, she said calmly, to protect her son from a decision that could have ruined his future. He's my son, Lucas snapped, voice cracking. You stole 12 years from me. She was a waitress, Evelyn said sharply. From nowhere. With nothing, except a pretty face and a mistake she expected you to fix. Lucas stared at her. You were 19, she went on. Oxford was waiting. So was the company. You had a legacy to uphold. So you paid her to disappear. I offered her an alternative, she said coldly. A generous one. She refused. Lucas shot back. Did that surprise you? That not everyone is for sale? Evelyn's expression hardened. That girl would have anchored you to an ordinary life. A child before your life even began. Lucas shook his head, grief rising like a tide. He's not a burden, he said slowly. He's brilliant, musical, kind, and he grew up without a father. Because you decided he wasn't worth the risk. And now what? Evelyn hissed. You'll trade everything you've built for guilt and sentiment for a ready-made family that will expect things from you. Lucas let out a bitter laugh. That's all you can see, isn't it? People wanting, taking. You've forgotten that some things are real, that some bonds aren't measured in assets. I know this world. Lucas. Her voice rose again. That girl and her son. His name is Elliot. Lucas interrupted, voice sharp. My son's name is Elliot, back at his office. Lucas stared at his screen without seeing it. You've got that look, said a voice from the doorway. He didn't need to turn. Graham Ellis leaned against the frame, arms folded. What look? Lucas asked, eyes still on the laptop. The same one you had before you made the Westline acquisition. Focused, but borderline reckless. Graham stepped inside. This is about Isla and the boy. Lucas finally looked up. I can't change the past, but I can make sure I don't miss another day. Graham hesitated. Your mother called me. Lucas didn't even blink. Of course she did. She's worried, Graham added. Thinks you're being manipulated. That this is all driven by guilt. Lucas scoffed. Let me guess, Isla's after my money, my name, my assets. Graham gave a small nod. Something along those lines. Lucas exhaled, a deep, tired breath. I need a plan, he said, because Elliot doesn't know I'm his father. Not yet. He stared out the window. The city lights blurred beyond the glass. But he will. If this leaks to the press, Graham warned, his voice low. Heartwave's CEO has secret love child. It'll be chaos. And devastating for the boy, he added. Not to mention what it might do to Isla's name. Lucas's jaw tightened. She's worked hard to build a world for them. I won't be the reason it falls apart. So, what's your move? I need insight, Lucas said. People close to her. People who know what Elliot needs. What Isla needs. If I'm going to step into their lives, it has to be with care. Do you have someone in mind? Jenna Clark. She runs the restaurant. Isla mentioned that she's the one who arranged the piano gig. They seem close. Graham was already pulling out his phone. I'll reach out. Quietly. Discretion matters, Lucas emphasized. Graham raised an eyebrow. When am I ever not discreet? 2 days later. Lucas sat in a small, sunlit cafe on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, miles from the financial district, miles from headlines. Jenna Clark arrived precisely on time. Early 40s, sharp gaze, and the kind of poise that came from years of reading people for who they really were. She didn't smile, didn't offer her hand. Mr. Hart, she said plainly. Let's skip the niceties. Why am I here? Thank you for coming, Lucas began. I'd like to talk to you about Isla and Elliot. Her eyes narrowed. If you're here to stir up trouble, I'm not. He interrupted gently. I want to help them, support them, nothing more. Her silence was heavy with doubt. I didn't know about Elliot, Lucas said softly. Not until last week. My mother made sure of it. Something in his voice must have landed. Jenna's posture softened ever so slightly. She told me she ran into you, but she didn't say much. Isla protects her son, fiercely. She should, Lucas said. That's why I need help, guidance. I don't want to bulldoze my way in and break what she spent 12 years building. Jenna studied him, her eyes sharper now, not with suspicion, but assessment. Did you know, she said slowly, that she plays your song every year on Elliot's birthday? Lucas blinked. No. Every year, Jenna said, her voice distant. No matter what shift she worked, she'd come in after hours, sit at the piano and play. I asked her once why. She said it was the only way she knew to give her son something of his father, even if he never knew. The weight of that truth landed on Lucas's chest like a stone. 2 weeks later, Lucas and Isla sat in the same quiet cafe where everything between them had been cracked open. He slid a business card across the table. Music consultant Isla asked, brow raised as she read it. For Heartwave, Lucas said, we're about to launch a new line of professional-grade audio tech, headphones, speakers, tools made by musicians for musicians, and you thought of me. Her tone gave nothing away. You're qualified, he said. Simply, honestly, you're finishing your degree. You teach, you perform. You understand sound from the inside. She studied him, cautious, but listening. This wasn't about a job offer. This was a bridge, carefully, gently being built. This feels like charity, Hila said quietly, turning the business card between her fingers. It's not, Lucas replied, his voice steady. It's business. I need someone with your understanding of sound, of music, someone who feels it, not just analyzes it. He paused, catching himself before finishing his sentence. You need money. She finished for him, her tone edged but calm. Opportunity, he corrected. A chance to apply your talent in a space that recognizes its worth. He slid a small folder across the table. The compensation is aligned with industry standards for independent consultants. Isla didn't touch it. She studied him instead, like someone trying to read a map and gauge the terrain beneath. And this offer, she asked. It has nothing to do with Elliot. Lucas didn't hesitate. It has everything to do with Elliot, and with you. But that doesn't make it less legitimate. I want to be part of your lives, but without undoing what you've worked so hard to build. She flipped the card again, slowly. I'd still keep my other jobs. Teaching, the restaurant. Of course. Lucas nodded. The consultancy is flexible, part-time, at your pace. If it works, we can explore something longer term. Isla was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, Elliot liked you. Lucas's heart leapt, more than it should have. I liked him too, he said, the warmth in his voice unmistakable. After we left the park, he asked about you. Wanted to know how I knew so much about music. She met his gaze. I didn't lie to him, but I didn't tell him everything either. When do we? Lucas asked gently the question that had been pressing on him for weeks. I don't know, Isla admitted. He's built a version of his father in his mind, someone who didn't abandon him, but simply didn't know. That's what's protected him. I would never have walked away, Lucas said, his voice firm. I believe that. Now, she replied. But Elliot's been filling that gap for 12 years, and suddenly telling him that his father is Lucas Hart, CEO of Heartwave Systems. That's a lot for a child to carry. Lucas nodded slowly, accepting the truth in her words. So, we build trust first. Yes, Isla agreed, and about the offer she drew a slow breath. I'll think about it. 3 days later, she said yes. Within a few weeks, Isla began visiting Heartwave's headquarters twice a week, collaborating with the audio engineering team. Lucas kept his distance during work hours, letting her earn her own place within the company. But outside those hours, something began to shift. They met regularly to talk about Elliot, about school, his music, his quiet moments of brilliance. Music lessons became weekly visits. Walks through city parks turned into quiet conversations. Elliot opened up slowly, and so did Lucas. But what surprised Lucas most was how his feelings for Isla began to reawaken. Not new love, remembered love. A love that had never left, only been buried beneath years of distraction and ambition. And then there was Evelyn. She was never one to accept defeat, Lucas had learned that as a child. He should have remembered. Mr. Hart. His assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. There's a Ms. Carter here to see you. She says it's a personal matter. The name didn't spark anything, but the tone of his assistant did. Send her in, he said. The woman who walked into his office wore luxury-like armor clothes that whispered status, but sat awkwardly on her frame, like a costume that didn't quite fit. Someone playing a part. Lucas stood slowly. Yes, he asked, and the door behind him seemed to close just a little too loudly. Mr. Hart, thank you for meeting with me. The woman extended a perfectly polished hand. Her smile was professional, calculated, but her eyes held no warmth. Melissa Carter, she said smoothly, lifestyle editor at City Business Weekly. Lucas accepted the handshake, his own reflexes long trained for boardroom civility. What can I do for you? Ms. Carter. I'm working on a piece, she said, slipping into the seat across from him, a feature on high-powered executives navigating the intersection of work and family. She opened a sleek portfolio, and from what I understand, you've recently reconnected with an old flame, discovered you have a son. Lucas froze. His pulse slowed. Only a handful of people knew the truth about Elliot, and none of them were talking to the press. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, he said coolly. Have I? She slid a photograph across the table, then another. Lucas stared down at images of himself, Isla, and Elliot in the park, smiling, playing guitar. The boy's resemblance to him was impossible to deny. These were taken last week, she said. Lovely shots, very candid. Lucas kept his face expressionless. But inside, rage boiled. I don't discuss my private life, he said, each word deliberate. Of course, she replied, gathering the photos slowly. But our readers find stories like this compelling. A tech mogul, a hidden son, a mother who worked tables to raise him. It writes itself. The implication was crystal clear. Who gave you these? He asked, his voice low. An anonymous source, she said lightly. Someone worried you're being taken advantage of. His jaw tightened. He knew exactly who it was. Evelyn. This was her next move, forcing his hand, dragging Elliot into headlines, hoping he'd retreat. What do you want? Lucas asked. Your side of the story, she said, smile widening, before someone else tells it, their way. After escorting her out with vague promises to consider it, Lucas immediately summoned Graham to his office. She's escalating, Graham said grimly after hearing the story. Using the press to wedge you away from Isla and Elliot. She won't win, Lucas muttered. But I have to warn Isla. That evening, for the first time, Lucas stood outside Isla's building. It wasn't the contrast to his own world that struck him, the simple brick, the narrow hallways. It was the warmth. Her apartment wasn't polished. It lived. Framed sheet music lined the walls. A time-worn piano rested in the corner. School awards and handwritten notes were pinned proudly near the kitchen. It smelled like coffee and hope. When Lucas told her about the journalist, Isla sat very still, hands clasped tightly in her lap. This was always the risk, she said quietly. Being seen. I'm sorry, he whispered. It was my mother. It's not just your mother. Her voice was firm now. Different. There's something else you should know. Lucas looked up, heart tightening. What is it? She took a long breath. When I found out I was pregnant, I was scared. 19. No family. I tried calling your dorm at Oxford, but I never got through. So I went to your mother. I thought maybe she could help me reach you. Lucas closed his eyes, the memory of that winter coming back in pieces. She wasn't kind, Isla continued, but someone else was. Lucas opened his eyes. Who his name was Michael Donovan. He was a graduate student visiting your mother to talk about a scholarship program. Lucas frowned. The name tugged at something vague in the back of his mind. Michael. He saw I was upset. He listened. He offered help when your mother shut the door in my face. And in that moment, something fragile and complicated began to unfold. A shoulder to lean on. That's all he was. Isla said softly. We became friends. Nothing more. Friends, Lucas echoed, the question clear in his tone. Yes, she affirmed, her voice firmer now. But your mother, she's been telling people otherwise, that Michael and I had something romantic right around the time Elliot was conceived. Lucas felt the floor shift beneath him. She's questioning Elliot's paternity. Isla nodded, her eyes never leaving his. It's a lie. Lucas, Elliot is your son, but your mother is desperate. She's planting doubt where she can. Do you still speak to Michael? He asked carefully. No. He moved to California years ago, she replied, then hesitated. But your mother might have found him. I don't know what she could have promised to make him play along with her version. Lucas raked his hands through his hair. This is what she does. She doesn't fight, she manipulates. She twists things, finds pressure points, and pushes. Then a realization came. But it doesn't matter. Isla blinked. What it doesn't matter, he repeated, louder now. Even if there was uncertainty, which there isn't, it wouldn't change anything. He leaned closer, these past few weeks, getting to know him, seeing him laugh, hearing him play. He's mine, Isla, in every way that counts, blood or no blood. He's my son. Tears welled in Isla's eyes, unbidden. You have no idea, she whispered, voice breaking, what it means to hear you say that. Before more could be said, a knock echoed from the front door. Isla stood, blinking quickly, wiping her cheeks. That's probably Elliot. He was helping a friend with a science project. When she opened the door, Elliot stepped in, guitar in one hand, backpack in the other. He froze. Hey, he said, surprise flashing across his face. Didn't know you were coming over. Last minute thing, Lucas said casually. Your mom and I were talking about the audio project. Elliot nodded, but something in his expression said he wasn't buying it entirely. At 12, he was already reading the space between words. Cool, he mumbled. I'm going to put my stuff away. As his door clicked shut, Isla turned back to Lucas. We have to tell him soon. He's starting to piece it together. I agree. What about this weekend, she offered. We could go to the lake house. Quiet, private, no questions. Lucas nodded. Perfect. I'll arrange everything. But neither of them could predict what was coming. 2 nights later, Isla was scheduled to perform original pieces at Auburn and Ash, for the first time, an intimate showcase arranged quietly by Lucas through Jenna. It was meant to celebrate her talent. Elliot was backstage, clutching a bouquet of wildflowers, waiting to surprise her after the final song. Lucas was running late, caught in a last-minute call with international partners, and that's when Evelyn Hart made her move. She arrived unannounced, dressed to impress, every detail calculated. With her name alone, she bypassed security and slipped past the velvet curtain to the private backroom. Isla was at the mirror, adjusting her earrings. When the door swung open, I thought it was time we spoke directly, Evelyn said, her tone cool, her presence commanding. Isla stood, startled but composed. Mrs. Hart, I'm performing in 20 minutes. This won't take long, Evelyn replied smoothly, stepping fully into the room. I'm here, she added, to offer you a second chance at walking away. The same offer I made over a decade ago still stands, Evelyn said, her tone smooth as silk. A generous settlement. All I ask in return is that you and your son walk away. Isla's voice remained steady. I've never asked Lucas for a cent. Everyone has a price. Evelyn replied crisply, name yours. Think of what you could do for the boy. Private schools, top-tier music tutors, university debt-free. All it requires is your silence and distance. He doesn't need luxury, Isla said, voice firm. He needs his father. Evelyn gave a short, brittle laugh. Lucas Hart was made for boardrooms, not bedtime stories. When the charm of this little domestic fantasy wears off, he'll resent it. Resent you and the child you've dragged into his life. Neither woman noticed the soft footsteps outside the door. Elliot had arrived early. His bouquet of flowers meant to surprise his mom after her performance trembled in his hands. And then, he heard it. Everything. The name, the identity, the truth. Lucas Hart, his guitar mentor, the man who had shown him chord progressions and smiled at his awkward jokes, wasn't just some old friend. He was his father. The flowers slipped from his fingers. He turned and ran, the restaurant's back door slamming softly behind him. Lucas arrived just in time to see a familiar silhouette disappear around the corner. "Elliot," he called. But the boy didn't look back. Inside, the tension crackled like static. Evelyn and Isla stood frozen, the air between them thick with confrontation. "What did you say to her?" Lucas demanded, eyes locked on his mother. Before Evelyn could answer, Jenna rushed in, panic on her face. "He's gone. Elliot. He left these." She held up the now crushed bouquet, petals bruised but still intact. Isla gasped. Her hands covered her mouth. "He heard us," she whispered. "He knows." The next 2 hours blurred into a frantic search, Lucas and Isla racing through streets and sidewalks, calling his name. Isla's performance was canceled. Evelyn, for once, said nothing, just returned to her car, expression unreadable. It was Graham who finally called. "I found him," he said. The old Memorial Park, near the bandstand. They approached quietly. Elliot sat alone on a bench, guitar case beside him. The stage ahead of him stood empty, silent as memory. Lucas and Isla sat on either side. For a long moment, no one said a word. "This is where you met, isn't it?" Elliot asked at last, his voice remarkably calm. "Yeah," Isla said softly. "They held free music programs in the summer. That's how it all began." Elliot turned to Lucas. "Why didn't you tell me all the words?" Lucas had rehearsed gone. "Useless." "I wanted to," he said. "We both did. We were trying to find the right moment, a way that wouldn't hurt you." "So you've known for what?" "A few weeks." Elliot's voice cracked, despite his effort to stay composed. "And you just decided to show up in my life like this?" Lucas swallowed hard. "I only found out the night I saw your mom playing piano," he said quietly. "I had no idea she was pregnant when I left for school. I never got her calls, her letters, nothing." He looked directly at Elliot. "If I had known about you, I would have been there. Every day, from the very beginning. Your grandmother made sure your father never knew," Isla said gently, her voice careful, measured. "And when we finally found each other again, we didn't want to rush the truth. We hoped you'd get to know him first for who he is now." Elliot sat still, his fingers curled around the edge of the bench. His eyes, so much like Isla's, held layers of thought, too big for his age. "I used to write songs about you," he said, turning to Lucas. Lucas blinked. "Little melodies, stories." Elliot continued. "Sometimes you were a jazz musician touring across Europe. Other times, a scientist in a desert lab, saving people, doing big things." Lucas's heart clenched. "And instead, you got a businessman who forgot how to hold a melody," he said softly. "But you still play," Elliot replied. "You still hear it." Lucas smiled, surprised by the warmth in his son's voice. "Because of your mother," he said. "She was the one who taught me to listen." Elliot looked between them, these two people, bound by blood and distance. So, what happens now? 3 months passed. Spring melted into summer, and life shifted with it. Lucas bought a quiet apartment not far from Isla's. He didn't leave the penthouse, not entirely, but now, he had a second home. A space where Elliot's laughter filled the rooms and music drifted down hallways, still learning how to echo warmth. He finalized the legal acknowledgement of his paternity, quietly and efficiently, thanks to Graham's careful handling. There were no press releases, no headlines, just the truth, settled where it mattered most. Elliot, after the shock, welcomed his father with a kind of hope only children still dared to have. They met on weekends, working through chord progressions, writing verses. Lucas showed him how to build harmony from fragments, and Elliot, in return, reminded his father how music felt. Isla watched them with a quiet joy. She hadn't fully let go of the pain. 13 years don't dissolve in one season. But something inside her softened each time she saw Elliot beam with pride. Each time he said "Dad" without hesitation. As for Evelyn, she vanished into silence. After the confrontation at Auburn and Ash, she withdrew to her estate. The only communication Lucas received came in the form of terse emails about quarterly projections. Her absence felt like both a relief and an unanswered question. Until the phone rang. "Mr. Hart," said the voice on the other end, measured and clinical. "Your mother has been admitted. A cardiac episode. She's stable." But the doctors suggest family presence. Lucas hadn't seen her like this before. No tailored suit, no pearls, just a thin hospital gown. Her makeup gone, her hair undone, and with all of that stripped away, she looked small. "Lucas," she said when she saw him, her voice uncertain for the first time in memory. "You came." "Of course I did." He sat, leaving space between them respectful, but clear. "I've lost you, haven't I?" she asked. The honesty in her question caught him off guard. "No, Mother, but things have changed." He met her eyes. "I've set boundaries, and if you want to be part of my life, part of Elliot's life, you have to respect them." Her expression shifted at the mention of her grandson. "The boy," she murmured. "He seems bright." "He's remarkable," Lucas said, without hesitation, "especially with music." She nodded faintly. "Like you once were." Lucas's smile was quiet. "He's better than I ever was." A long silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. 13 years of silence, 3 months of guarded distance. Between them lay a chasm neither quite knew how to cross. "I thought I was protecting you," Evelyn said at last. Her voice, though quiet, carried decades of expectation and tightly held control. "Your father and I worked so hard to build something worth passing on. I couldn't bear to see you throw it away for sentiment." Lucas looked at her, his tone firm, but not cruel. "That was never your choice to make. You took 12 years from me," he continued. 12 years Elliot never had his father. Evelyn turned her face to the window, but not before he saw it, something he never imagined. A tear. In all his 46 years, Lucas Hart had never seen his mother cry. A week later, a surprise arrived at Evelyn's hospital room. Elliot. He stood outside the door, a small keyboard slung under one arm. Isla stood nearby, worry etched across her face. He insisted. She told Lucas, who had just arrived. He said he wanted to meet his grandmother. Inside the room. Evelyn looked up from her pillow as the boy entered. He hovered near the foot of her bed, unsure, fingers tightening around the handle of the keyboard. "Hello," she said. Her voice, usually sharp and composed, now softened by age, medication, and something else, uncertainty. "Hi." Elliot shifted his weight awkwardly. "Mom says, you're my grandmother." Evelyn's eyes flicked briefly to the door where Isla stood, then back to the boy. "Yes," she replied. "I am." "I brought my keyboard," Elliot said, holding it up. "Dad Lucas told me you used to play too." A flicker of surprise crossed Evelyn's face. "I did," she admitted. "Years ago. Before. Business consumed everything. That's what he said happened to him, too." Elliot stepped forward and set the keyboard down on the tray in front of her. "Would you like to hear something I wrote?" For a moment, the proud woman hesitated. Then, she nodded. "You compose your own pieces." "Since I was 8, Elliot said. "Dad's helping me now. But I've been writing for a while. I'd love to hear it," Evelyn said. Her words were formal, but the warmth was real. Elliot played. The piece wove together structure and freedom, grace and experimentation. It had the complexity of Lucas's style, but also the soulfulness of Isla's touch. Evelyn listened, eyes widening, not just at the notes, but at the emotion behind them. When the final chord faded, she didn't speak right away. Then softly, she said, "That was remarkable. Thanks." Elliot smiled, sheepish. "Still needs work, especially the middle part. Maybe a minor 7th here," she suggested, pointing to a section. It would stretch the tension before the release. Elliot tried it, stopped, tried again. "That's it." He beamed. "That's what it needed." And just like that, for the next 15 minutes, grandmother and grandson sat together, lost in music theory, progressions, shared passion. Outside the door, Lucas and Isla watched in stunned silence, not out of fear, but wonder. As Elliot packed up, Evelyn spoke not with her usual calculation, but with something closer to tenderness, and something deeper was just beginning to unfold. "I hope you'll visit again, Elliot," Evelyn said quietly, her voice softer than it had ever been. "Maybe when I'm feeling stronger." "Sure," Elliot replied, without hesitation. Simple, honest. The kind of answer only a child could offer with no conditions attached. "Get well soon, Grandma." After he left, Evelyn looked toward the doorway where Isla stood, uncertain. "May I speak with you alone?" Lucas glanced at Isla, silently asking if she was comfortable. She nodded. "I'll be fine." When the door clicked shut, Evelyn took a slow breath. "I was wrong." The words hung in the air like something sacred. Evelyn Hart, who had built her life around image, authority, and control, had just done what no one had ever heard her do. "Admit fault. I thought I was protecting my son," she continued, her voice frail but steady, "and our legacy. But in the process, I nearly destroyed his chance at something real. I robbed myself of knowing my grandson." Isla's voice was soft. "Elliot has your ear for music." A ghost of a smile crossed Evelyn's lips. "Yes, he gets it from both sides. It seems—" "Both sides," Isla repeated. And in that moment, something shifted. Evelyn was no longer denying who Elliot was, no longer resisting his place in the world she had tried to control. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said plainly, "but I would like the chance to know him. On your terms, however you see fit." Isla looked at the woman who had once tried to buy her silence, now sitting small and aged in a hospital bed, asking for something she had never dared before: permission to belong. "Elliot makes up his own mind about people," she said gently. "If you're real with him, he'll see it. That's all any of us can ask." 4 months later, Lucas stood backstage at the Riverside Concert Hall, watching the final preparations unfold. What had started as a small fundraiser had blossomed into a full-scale gala, raising money to provide instruments, lessons, and scholarships for under-resourced youth. At the center of the program that night was Isla. For the first time in her life, she was taking the stage professionally, a dream delayed since she was 19 now, finally within reach. Nervous, Lucas asked, approaching quietly as she flipped through her sheet music one last time. Terrified, she whispered with a grin, but in the good kind of way. In the months since they had begun to rebuild their family, Lucas had watched her transform. She had reduced her hours at the restaurant. The consulting role had evolved into a full-time position, creative director for Heartwave's audio division. Her ideas had shaped product lines. Her insights had earned respect from engineers and executives alike. But the change ran deeper than titles. She stood straighter now, smiled more easily. Her laughter came freely, no longer weighed down by survival. She was dreaming again. "I have something for you," Lucas said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket. "I've carried this for 13 years. Isla's breath caught as he opened it. A delicate platinum ring, a single, perfect sapphire. "You kept it. I bought it the week before I left for London," he said. "I was going to ask you when I came home for Christmas." Isla's eyes shimmered. Her voice thickened. "Lucas, I'm not asking now," he added quickly, smiling through emotion. "I know we're still figuring things out." He looked down at the ring, then back at her. "But I wanted you to know, my heart never left." "We lost so much time," Lucas said quietly, his fingers gently closing over Isla's hand. "But even back then, I knew what we had was worth building a life around." He looked into her eyes. "I still believe that, more than ever." Isla touched the small velvet box in his palm, her thumb grazing the edge of the sapphire ring. Her eyes shimmered. "Keep it safe," she whispered, "but not too long." From the auditorium, the soft stir of strings warming up began to rise. A stagehand approached. 5 minutes to curtain. Lucas gave Isla's hand a reassuring squeeze. Break a leg, he said with a smile. Elliot and I will be in the front row. So will your other guest. Isla smiled knowingly. Victoria. He nodded. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself, and then turned toward the light. The future ahead of them wasn't flawless. There were still scars, still shadows, but there was also hope, undeniable and vibrant. And as the curtain began to rise, Lucas felt something certain in his chest. The melody that had once brought them together would now carry them forward, stronger, wiser, and more beautiful for all it had survived. In the garden of Lucas's new home, set peacefully between the noise of his corporate life and the rhythm of Isla's neighborhood, summer had arrived in full bloom. White chairs curved gently toward a floral archway, woven with hydrangeas and soft ivory roses. A string quartet tuned their instruments beneath it. It wasn't the grand society wedding Evelyn Hart had once imagined for her only son. But as she settled into her seat in the front row, there was no resistance in her face, only quiet peace. Beside her sat Graham, who had, to everyone's surprise, become a steady hand in bridging broken ties. Feeling nervous, he asked, straightening Lucas's tie just so, "Not about marrying Isla," Lucas replied, smiling. But the speech Elliot and I prepared, he gave a dramatic exhale, terrified. At that moment, Elliot stepped out, dressed in a tailored suit that mirrored Lucas's. His hair had been tamed almost, but a few curls refused to cooperate. "I'm taller than Mom now," he announced. "Almost," Lucas chuckled. "At this rate, you'll be taller than me by fall." "Mom's ready," Elliot said. "Jenna's just adjusting the veil." The ceremony began with a quiet grace, but when Isla appeared, walking down the garden path on Elliot's arm, just as he had insisted, the music shifted. The quartet began to play a piece familiar to everyone closest to them, Lucas's original melody, the one he had written for Isla at 17, now reimagined as a wedding march. Her eyes met his across the aisle, and in that silent exchange, they shared everything: gratitude, memory, love. There were no vows in this wedding, not spoken, anyway. Instead, after the officiant's brief words, Lucas and Isla walked together to the baby grand piano beneath a flowering cherry tree. They sat side by side and began to play. The piece told their story not in lyrics, but in harmony. It began as Lucas had once composed it, then shifted. Variations emerged, notes that reflected longing, distance, hope, minor chords slowly resolving into warmth, until, finally, the theme returned, transformed, stronger, deeper. Halfway through the final movement, Elliot stepped forward, guitar in hand, and joined them. 3 melodies, 3 lives intertwined in perfect harmony. A family not formed by perfection, but by choice, by healing, by love. When the final note faded, the garden held its breath, silent, still. Then, a wave of applause rose like a swell, breaking the quiet with joy. Later, as twilight deepened and the air filled with soft laughter and clinking glasses, Evelyn approached Isla, who stood watching Lucas and Elliot speak with a young violinist, the first recipient of the Hart Carter Music Scholarship. "You've given my son something I never could," Evelyn said, her voice almost lost in the breeze. "A family built on love, not expectation." Isla turned, surprised at the raw honesty in the woman's voice. "We all built this family," Isla replied gently. "Even you." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, a question without words. "If not for your interference," Isla continued carefully, "Lucas and I might have settled into something easy, predictable. But what we've lived through forced all of us to look closely at what really matters. We had to fight for it, forgive for it, and that made something stronger." Evelyn considered that, a perspective that didn't excuse her choices but offered her a place within the healing. "Perhaps you're right," she said, "though I wouldn't recommend my approach to anyone else." A hint of a smile softened her features. As the evening waned and guests began to drift away, Elliot, tired but happy, sat beside his grandmother, showing her his newest composition on a tablet. Lucas found Isla standing at the edge of the garden, watching stars emerge one by one. Second thoughts. Mrs. Hart, he teased, wrapping an arm around her waist. Not one, she replied, leaning into him, then added with a smirk. Though professionally, I'm still keeping Carter. I worked hard to build that name in the industry. I'm not giving it up now. I wouldn't dream of asking you to. Lucas smiled. They stood together, quiet and content, as fireflies blinked softly among the flowers. I had a thought, Lucas said. Eventually, we could shift part of the Heart Foundation's focus. What if we put more into music education, not just scholarships, but local programs, like the one where we first met? Ila's eyes lit up. Programs for kids who'd never afford lessons otherwise. Exactly. Start here, grow outward, one city, one community at a time. I love it, she whispered, then laughed. Look at us, plotting projects on our wedding night. This isn't work, Lucas said, pulling her close. It's purpose, something we build together, like that melody we played today. From the patio, a soft guitar drifted across the garden. It was Elliot improvising around the tune that had brought his parents together all those years ago. Evelyn sat nearby, eyes closed, swaying slightly to the music, her expression peaceful. Isla leaned her head on Lucas's shoulder. We've come full circle, she said. Only, the circle's bigger now. There's room for all of us. Lucas squeezed her hand, eyes still on their son. The path that had started with a long-forgotten melody at Auburn and Ash had not been smooth. It had wound through pain, through silence, through truths no one had wanted to face. But the music had never left. And now, stronger, deeper, and more alive than ever, it played on. Sometimes, the most beautiful melodies are the ones interrupted, the ones that return not with perfection, but with deeper meaning, with forgiveness, with love, hard-won. Lucas, Isla, and Elliot's story reminds us that even when time is lost, even when silence stretches wide, it's never too late to begin again. Not just as lovers, not just as parents, but as people who choose, every day, to show up for one another. The past didn't disappear. It echoed, and in that echo, they found each other. They wrote a new song together, and this time, it will play on. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Shining Stories. Help us spread more light, more healing, one story at a time. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the story you think is over is just waiting for the right note to begin again.